I might have reconsidered if I had realized that my wedding night would not mark the start of bliss, but rather the beginning of oppressive days spent in my husband's family home. I used to think that I would undoubtedly gain the respect of my in-laws if I was competent, self-reliant, and courteous. However, I was mistaken. My mother-in-law mentioned divorce 3 days after our wedding. This isn't because my husband and I are at odds, but rather due to financial concerns. My story is not the only one. This is the candid story of a woman who once entered into marriage with confidence, only to discover that respect cannot be gained by kindness alone. And I want to start at the beginning and tell you everything. I came into this marriage with all the enthusiasm of a woman who is old enough to understand what she deserves and what she wants. I was no longer a girl at 31 who fantasized about expensive honeymoons and wedding gowns. I envisioned myself with a life companion who would value me. I envisioned a family that would uphold the principles I had put so much effort into creating. I believed I had found such a family. Both of our careers were well established when we first met. He was gentle, composed, and above all, I didn't have to act stronger than I actually was in his presence. When we first started dating, he frequently told me, "You're the kind of independent, logical, and self-reliant woman I've always admired." I worked well as the head accountant for a large corporation. I never had to rely on anyone because my wage was sufficient. I had purchased a modest flat on the outskirts of the city before meeting him. This wasn't a boast, but rather a testament to my self-sufficiency. I thought this was the perfect time for us to get married. I was prepared to start a new chapter in my life. The house was filled with friendship, dinner tables, and laughter. At first, his family appeared to be friendly. His mother's remarks were sharp and a little harsh, but I thought she was telling the truth. I continued to think that everything would work itself out if I tried hard enough and was courteous enough. Do you get along with your mother-in-law? That was the question I wanted people to ask one day. I wanted to be able to answer. We had some disagreements at first, but we eventually understood one another. I desired a seamless start. I therefore nodded when my spouse proposed, despite the fact that I wasn't entirely at ease inside. "How about we spend some time living with my parents?" Mom suggested we could save money and she would assist with the chores. I've always liked living on my own. My little apartment served as my haven, a place where I could be who I am, complete with a daily routine and small habits. However, I reasoned that since I'm new to this family, I'll work a little harder and make some concessions. In the long run, it will be worthwhile. I would rather not be the type of daughter-in-law that moved out right away after moving in. I didn't want anyone to accuse me of being ungrateful, cold, or harsh, so I took up residence. I thought I could handle it when I moved in. I believed that harmony would be within my reach. This would enable me to make a genuine effort to uphold harmony. However, I was unaware that things would start to fall apart the moment I entered that home as a wife and daughter-in-law. The wedding night seemed like a lovely memory to me. After all the stress of wedding planning, my husband and I were able to finally relax on a quiet, private evening. All I wanted was to lay my head on the man's shoulder, chat, laugh, and start this new chapter in a cozy way. I was relaxing on the bed after changing into my nightgown when the doorbell rang. My spouse looked at me, a little taken aback. Who could that be? I briefly believed that my mother-in-law would have brought some ginger tea or some candies for a quick snack. However, there was no platter of treats when he opened the door. It was my mother-in-law with several envelopes for wedding presents and a crimson pouch. Without hesitation, she entered and glanced quickly around the bridal room. Then, without pretense, she stated plainly, "Let me keep these for you. They are the wedding gold and the guest money." What's the sense of hoarding it? What if you squander it carelessly? You two aren't in need, are you? Don't worry, I'll return it when necessary. Let me keep it. I froze, losing all the relief I had felt minutes earlier when the wedding commotion had subsided. Uncomfortably, my spouse stood silently and gazed at his mother. He said this before I could reply. "My wife can keep it for herself, Mom. We are not infants, we are grown-ups. It's been a long day, so you should relax." He spoke in a calm but forceful tone. And while I was thankful he didn't abandon me to deal with her alone, I also knew she wouldn't let his words go that simply. And I was correct. Without further word, my mother-in-law just slammed the door behind her. The first blow to the tranquility I had hoped for in this property was the deafening bang. The room was cooler than normal, and I sat quietly on the bed. "Are you all right?" my hubby inquired softly. I nodded, but the reality was that I was starting to navigate a life that I didn't completely comprehend. The knocking came back the following morning, right after I had finally slept for a few hours. It was 4 a.m. this time. It wasn't an alarm clock, and it wasn't my husband. My mother-in-law was there, and she didn't have a request this time. "Awaken, my love. You're not a princess, you're a bride. Check the time. Are you still asleep? Come do the laundry, water the plants, make breakfast, clean the floor, and organize the kitchen. Remember to water the orchid garden in the back as well." I rubbed my eyes. My mind was still in a stupor from the wedding night and the accumulation of fatigue, but my mother-in-law didn't give me a chance to object. Too much sleep makes you fat, and if you're too fat, giving birth will be hard. Knowing that every word I spoke, if I snapped now, would be branded as disrespectful, ungrateful, or a disobedient daughter-in-law, I bit my lip and swallowed the retort that almost came out. And not just on the second day, I would rather not make that impression. So, with my limbs stiff, I discreetly left the room and started what seemed like an unending morning. I was cleaning the stove, removing trash, cleaning dishes, mopping floors, and watering orchids. None of it was particularly difficult. But when it was given to me as orders before I had fully recovered from the physical and emotional toll of the wedding, it all felt like a quiet weight weighing down my chest. My spouse was still asleep. He was unaware of what had just transpired. My mother-in-law started her probing once more that afternoon as I was setting the rice bowl on the table. "So, where did you store the wedding presents that were in cash and gold?" I should have kept it, but apparently no one pays attention. I said nothing. I was unsure of how to react. In an attempt to change the subject, my spouse picked up some food and put it in my dish. My mother-in-law, however, was not so readily distracted. "Could you please clarify why the condo you purchased before the wedding is not registered in both of your names? Although you are now married, you did purchase it before. There ought to be no such division." I smiled slightly while attempting to speak in a composed tone. "Mom, when I bought that property, I had no idea who my husband would be. I mean, how could I have two names on it?" That response didn't sit well with her. She changed the subject in an instant. "How much does it cost you to rent it out each month? And what is your income? You haven't made any contributions to this house that I can see. You should learn to share as a daughter-in-law rather than living apart like this." I was unable to swallow my rice bite all of a sudden. I wasn't frugal. I wasn't self-centered. "Could you please clarify when it became necessary for me to contribute all of my finances to become a daughter-in-law?" I surveyed the table. Nobody spoke. My spouse ate in silence, keeping his head down. And me? I sensed an increasing void within. I thought my mother-in-law would ultimately alter her mind about me if I just stayed patient, acted politely, and kept to myself. However, I was mistaken. It took me 2 days to realize that every concession I made brought her one step closer to controlling every aspect of our lives. It all culminated in the afternoon of the third day. I was cleaning the living room with my hubby. We used a free moment to clean together because we hadn't had time to organize after the wedding. We were in a lighthearted mood together. I was a little relaxed for the first time in days, pleased that my husband was still at my side despite all the stress and anxiety. However, my mother-in-law entered less than 10 minutes later. She made no effort to conceal her judgment as she looked around the room. She said, crossing her arms across her chest, "I want to clarify something. You two will now pay me your full salary every month." I believed I had misheard her. "I'll take care of all the budgeting, saving, and spending. You two need not be concerned. It's easy to waste money when you're young and just married. You need an elderly person to run things." Too stunned to move, I stood motionless. She went on, her tone rougher now, and this time her eyes were fixed on me before my husband had even spoken. "Davy has always obeyed. He never disobeyed since he was young. However, he has changed since he started dating Mary. Given that he has already given her his money, what would happen if they divorced? He won't have anything left. I've been uneasy from the beginning." She concealed her income, refused to give the wedding gold, and purchased a home solely in her name. Before long, she will turn on him. Every phrase was like a knife. I was stunned as I stood there. My husband's expression stiffened. He spoke swiftly, as if to interrupt the allegations. Love is the reason Huang and I are together, Mom. We'll talk about financial matters between us. You don't have to be that anxious. However, my mother-in-law refused to listen. She reiterated, I'll be responsible for the finances. Don't expect anyone to support you later if you don't turn it over now. I was unable to contain myself at that point. I raised my voice, remaining as soft as possible, Mom. I didn't inherit my income. I earned it on my own. Although we all have different plans, I think everyone should be able to manage the money they earn. I don't spend carelessly, but I can't give anything up before I know my rights. After a brief pause, my mother-in-law sneered. Are you suggesting that the money is solely yours and not shared between the two of you? Who please explain how you plan to coexist while establishing such clear boundaries after only 3 days? How do you expect to coexist when you're already creating such distinct boundaries after just 3 days? I remained silent. I was aware that my response would only exacerbate the situation. I walked straight to our room after turning around, avoiding her critical stare. With my hands clasped tightly and my heart thumping in my chest, I sat down on the bed once I had shut the door. I refrained from crying. I wasn't upset. Simply put, I was let down. My mother-in-law started discussing breakups, divorce, and avoiding financial loss 3 days after our wedding. Not because I fought with or caused any rifts in our relationship. However, she was unable to accept that I was responsible for what was really mine. I started to wonder, why must I demonstrate that I am not avaricious? Why are my home, my job, and the wedding gold all viewed as part of some self-serving plot? Why does this family view an independent daughter-in-law who has never relied on anyone or begged for assistance as a threat? I never considered getting a divorce. But only 3 days into our marriage, my mother-in-law inserted such hurtful remarks. I'm not the type of woman that gets frustrated easily or acts violently. However, after that afternoon, when she insisted on managing our pay and charged me with plotting to abandon my husband in order to seize the assets, I experienced an emotion I had never experienced before. There is a strong sense of discomfort regarding this marriage. Not because I wasn't in love with my spouse. However, I started to question whether the man I loved would truly stand by me during challenging times. I didn't go down for supper that evening. I let my spouse know that I wasn't feeling good. I was tired, and I wasn't lying. I am emotionally exhausted, but not physically exhausted. After coming upstairs and setting a bowl of porridge on the table, my husband took a seat next to me. After a brief period of silence, he said, I apologize for the incident that occurred this afternoon. Mom can be a little irascible at times. She didn't mean what she said. Don't take it personally. I said nothing. He didn't argue with his mother, and I didn't blame him. But when all he had to say was that his mother had spoken a little too much, I couldn't claim I wasn't devastated. All I want is to live a decent life without requesting anything from anyone. But it never seems to be enough, no matter how hard I try. There was a glimmer of discomfort in his eyes as he gazed at me. I understand. I'll speak with Mom once more. But don't worry too much, she's old now. For me, I only hope you can wait a little while longer. The final phrase, for me, caused me to hesitate. I had been patient for so long already. I moved in by giving up my place. When they woke me up at 4 in the morning, I remained silent. When asked about every dollar I made and every item I possessed, I didn't argue. When she made fun of me for not having kids yet, I remained silent. I said nothing. For love, keep quiet. Keep quiet to maintain harmony. I kept quiet because I thought a decent wife should be able to bear hardship. However, I've since come to understand that people were using my silence to promote unacceptable ideas. When I went down to the kitchen the following morning to assist my mother-in-law in making breakfast, she remained silent. She merely scanned my entire body. There was tension in the air between us. She repeated the question in a chilly tone at the breakfast table. So, have you two given the money any more thought? I still believe that handling it myself is better for the family. I set down my chopsticks and answered softly, Mom, I think all adults need to be capable of handling their money. My spouse and I will decide what to do on our own. However, I must politely refuse to give anyone, including you, my full wage. There was utter silence at the table. My husband looked up as if he wanted to say something, but instead he looked back down and continued eating. I saw my mother-in-law grinning. Humph. I was aware. You've already revealed your true nature just 1 week into your marriage. How could a daughter-in-law respond to her mother-in-law in this way? You cannot expect harmony in our home if you are incapable of showing respect for your elders. I didn't continue speaking. Not because I was scared, however, I knew she wasn't paying attention. She was not interested in talking. She desired authority. I found myself thinking about my tiny apartment, the one I used to live alone in, as I lay in bed that night and gazed up at the ceiling. So serene. This was a place where no one questioned my objectives, controlled my timetable, or meddled in my decisions. I missed the peaceful evenings spent journaling, cooking for one, and reading by the window under the gentle glow of a table lamp. I missed being responsible for my time, my space, and, well, me. I never considered leaving my hubby. However, my husband's protracted silence and my mother-in-law's unwavering presence caused me to wonder, will I still be me if I continue to live this way? I felt like I was walking a tightrope in the days that followed. One small mistake could lead me into a situation. I'm unsure of how to escape. My mother-in-law stopped talking to me personally. Rather, she constantly hinted at me and made passive-aggressive comments, continually contrasting me with other daughters-in-law. When she moved in, her friend's daughter-in-law gave her her entire salary, she would say one day. One day, she would compliment her oldest sister's good, obedient daughter-in-law. I was aware that those remarks weren't merely incidental. They were like needles, skillfully inserted into every meal, every discussion, and every sidelong glance that was tinged with condemnation. I didn't respond, not because I was emotionless. However, I was too fatigued to persist in defending myself, asserting that I wasn't impolite or avaricious. That's how I lived in my marriage. It's like a tenant renting space. I went to work during the day. I performed my tasks by night. Even so, I assisted her in setting the table. I continued to water the orchids. I never raised my voice and still made an effort to be kind. However, I felt smaller, more out of place in this house every night as I lay in bed. It wasn't my mother-in-law who caused me the most pain. My spouse was the one who consistently opted for quiet. There was nothing wrong with him. He never did anything correctly, though. He still remembered my birthday, picked me up from work, was kind to me, and asked me what I wanted to eat on the weekends. However, he remained silent when I needed him to defend me from his mother's remarks. I can still clearly recall one supper. His mother reiterated, "As you can see, astute women are adept at handling their spouse's finances. Who gives the woman all control? The man will have nothing left over if they ever get divorced." I put down my chopsticks gently and turned to face him. He avoided looking at me. Rather, he scooped up additional food and put it in her bowl with care. "Mom, hurry. Simply eat," he said. "Let's not bring that up again." That was it. No defense, there is no dispute. He simply dismissed it as if nothing had occurred. For once, I had thought he might say something to help me feel less isolated. However, it was always the same. Slowly, I came to the realization that I was the only member of this family. After doing all the cleaning one evening, I took some time to write in my journal. I had a passion for writing. To maintain my inner world, I used to write a lot reports, stories, and diary entries every night. However, this was the first time I picked up a pen again after almost a week of marriage. I composed. Despite becoming a daughter-in-law, I feel alienated. Everyone here closely monitors every move I make. We interpret every attempt as a plot. I'm worn out. I would rather not give up, though. Marriage shouldn't be a battlefield, in my opinion. It ought to be a location where two people attempt to construct a home together. However, if I'm making it by myself, is it still a home to me? With emotion tightening my throat, I closed the journal. After work the following day, my mother-in-law said something that will always stick in my memory. I'll say it now. In this house, there is no such thing as keeping things apart. When you're someone's wife or daughter-in-law, you should share everything. If not, get out. Everyone will have an easier time. I could easily hear every word as I stood there. My husband was still sitting close by, silent, face down. I looked at a picture of my former residence when I unlocked my phone that evening. It was only a little over 50 square meters, but it had been mine before. It was a place where I was fully myself, free, and at peace. After getting married, I never thought I'd go back there. However, I was curious for the first time. Do I require a location to retreat to? I thought I could handle this. I believed that things would settle down after a few months. If I was kind and patient enough, my mother in law would finally come to terms with me and accept me. However, I was mistaken. Unacknowledged kindness is interpreted as weakness. Unrespected silence is interpreted as consent. And after people become accustomed to stepping over your boundaries without facing any repercussions, they will continue step by step until you have nothing left to defend. When I got home from work that morning, my mother in law's voice could be heard all the way down the street as she stood on the porch with her phone in hand. I can assure you that today's daughters in law are not ashamed. Less than a week after getting married, you're already hoarding money and showing no regard for elders. Doesn't make any financial contributions to the home. Just embrace her savings and unwind like royalty? I went cold. Her statements were not false. However, I found it difficult to understand that she was expressing her annoyances in such a way to the neighbors, proudly and loudly as though she were offering her complaints for sale. I entered and welcomed her as though she hadn't spoken. Without answering, she glanced at me and turned away. She began once more that afternoon when I was doing the dishes. Why has the cuisine been so uninteresting lately? Are you uncertain about the process of preparing food? A wife and daughter-in-law will quickly lose their husband if they give him this kind of food. I put the plate down and took my time drying my hands. Mother, I believe we should have an open discussion. With her arms crossed and the same arrogant look that suggested she was prepared to teach me a lesson, she hesitated. I gave her a direct glance. I spoke quietly, disturbingly quietly. I've tried my hardest to live a responsible life ever since I moved into this place. I have not been indolent. I have not been impolite. I don't squander cash. I've never asked for a dime from this family. I go to work and make my own money. However, I've only received criticism, mistrust, and insults in return. Her lips curled into a mocking smirk as she rapidly recovered from her moment of surprise. The daughter-in-law now believes she can yell at her mother-in-law, huh? I gave a head shake. Mother, I'm not getting louder. I'm simply being honest. I can't endure being treated like an alien every single day in a home, like someone who comes here to deprive your family of something. After hearing us, my spouse left the room. He glanced at his mother, then at me, like somebody torn between two battlefields, not knowing which side to choose. I faced him, and for the first time, I spoke without hesitation and clearly, I cherish you. However, I can't continue to live this way. I can't live in a house where everyone influences each other's personal decisions. I refuse to allow your mother to rule over my income, assets, or self-respect. He was quiet for a long time. Then he let out a sigh. Therefore, what will you do? I whispered back. I'm returning to my previous residence. I need room to breathe, to reflect. I won't abandon you. However, I also refuse to remain and endure insults. I packed my journals, a few books, and a few clothes that evening. I didn't let my husband stop me. He simply sat in silence, as though he was aware that if he attempted to prevent me from moving forward under such circumstances, he wouldn't simply lose his spouse, he would lose the real me. I rolled my suitcase to the door. Silently, my mother-in-law stood in the hallway with her arms folded. I gave her one final glance before saying in a firm voice, "You're not required to adore me. However, I hope you will at least show me some respect. I understand that all I'm requesting is fairness." The door shut behind me. I strolled outside in the peaceful night air. Don't cry, don't be afraid. It was just a feeling of relief. There was no way out. I decided to take a stand on my behalf for the first time. It was just like the tiny flat I occupied before getting married. Cream paint was still on the walls. I had selected the same rough cloth for the curtains. There was still a hint of old coffee in the tiny kitchen. Everything was familiar. But I, the one who came back, made the largest difference. I didn't return as the lady who had previously envisioned getting married. I returned with eyes that had witnessed realities that no one had forewarned me of. My heart was still full with love when I returned. However, he was now aware of his limits. I sat silently in the dark that first night, back after opening the window. No one was reprimanding me. At 4 a.m., nobody is waking me up. No more inquiries such as, where is the money? Who owns the house? What is your income? There was only the wind. I am regaining my ability to breathe at my own pace. I kept my mother in the dark. I kept my buddies in the dark. I didn't want rumors to spread about my personal story. All I wanted was peace. I need a quiet place where I might recover. I went to work as normal every day. As previously, I continued to read, cook, go food shopping, and water the plants. However, something was different. I went back to writing. Not a journal, however. Tales of being a daughter-in-law captivate me. Regarding the unseen limits of a marriage, I felt alone in a crowded house. I didn't write to assign blame. I wrote to better understand myself and to start the healing process. I was silent for a week until my hubby sent me a message, "I'm missing you. Mom claims that you are too obstinate." I'm unsure of how to proceed. I read it. I didn't become upset. I am not depressed at all. Simply remain calm. I answered, I haven't abandoned you. But unless things change, I can't continue living this way. I require a companion. I am not someone who looks on helplessly as I suffer harm. He took a while to respond, but I felt those words would be sufficient to convey to him I was a different person. My mother-in-law called me a few days later. On the line, her voice had lost its sharpness. It moved slowly, weary. Come have dinner at home. Nobody cooks as well as you do. I hesitated for a second, then responded, I'm able to return. However, we should not continue in the same manner. I went back to my husband's house that night. Rather than being a shy daughter-in-law, but as a lady, she was aware of her value. It seemed like a strange dinner. My mother-in-law remained silent. My spouse gazed at me as though he had misplaced something valuable. I had the excellent fortune to locate it once more. My mother-in-law came over as I was getting up to wash the dishes. She spoke softly. I never imagined you'd have such strength. I used to worry that if my daughter-in-law had her own possessions, my son wouldn't have anything. However, I was mistaken. You have held this family together. I couldn't think of anything to say. However, I felt lighter. That evening I left. I went back to my apartment. Not in a fit of rage, however, because I realized something. It takes more than one meal to earn respect. It results from real transformation. That old apartment was still where I resided. It wasn't roomy or opulent. It was mine, though. I was able to be who I really was there. I made my own coffee in the mornings and listened to my favorite mellow music. At 4 a.m., nobody woke me up to water orchids or mop floors. I ate by myself in the evenings. I wasn't alone, though. Since I was eating quietly, without bias, not subject to inspection, I did not abandon my marriage. I left a conflict that I had no desire to engage in. I wasn't angry when I left. I departed since I was aware of I would lose what little sweetness I still had if I didn't go out. My husband came to find me later. He brought no excuses. He brought something superior, a heartfelt suggestion. I wish to make a fresh start. We'll live alone this time. Just the two of us will construct our house. To avoid escaping my mom, but to keep my wife safe. She is the woman I admire and love. I gave him a look. There was no longer any uncertainty in his eyes. A man was what I saw, not only in love, but in comprehension. I gave a nod. I am not in a hurry. But enough to let him know I pardon, not because I'm frail, however, because I am sufficiently powerful. I intend not to spend the rest of my life harboring resentment. We then left home to live independently. My mother-in-law stopped meddling. Perhaps she hadn't changed all that much, however. She had realized one thing. If she desired to continue living with her son, his wife was someone she had to accept for what she was. I no longer view marriage as a fantasy. It's an adventure, full of difficulties and tears. There are times when you want to quit. However, if both parties are still interested in continuing, if they are able to align themselves, in that case, marriage is still a valuable relationship. I'm not sharing this tale to be critical or to accuse. For ladies like me, I'm sharing it. Those who have made excessive sacrifices to be a good daughter-in-law, to be respectful, or because they're afraid of being labeled difficult, it's appropriate to show others respect. But in the process, don't give up on yourself. Nobody has the authority to insist that you give up your financial situation, your life, or your sense of value. This is simply because you are someone's daughter-in-law. And above all, it's acceptable for you to feel the need to hold on. What you've established with a lot of effort is impressive. Having your space is not a sign of selfishness. I used to say nothing. I was a sacrificer once. For so long, I waited for someone to stand up for me. However, ultimately, the only individual who could genuinely defend me was me. If you find yourself in a similar circumstance, keep in mind, you have the right to set boundaries. You are free to decide how you want to love yourself. Additionally, you are free to leave anything at any time. You get smaller as a result. Because you weren't made to win over everyone. Your purpose was to truly live as you are.